what's going on, everybody? It's Brandon, and welcome back to Marotta Media. Well, here we are again. Another year has come and gone, and you know what that means? It is time for my end of the year lists. If you're new to my channel, what I like to do at the end of every year, like most movie YouTube channels, I like to go over the best and worst movies of the year to me. And since I like to end the year on a positive note, I always like to start with the worst of the year. And that's what I will be going over in this video today. There are 20 movies that range from bad to abysmal that made my list. These are the worst movies of the year to me, not according to anybody else. This is my opinion. And I know not everybody will agree. In fact, there are some movies on my list that I know for a fact some people love and will get mad at me over. And I will be going over the bottom 10 very briefly. I will get into my more in-depth thoughts on the top 10. So without further ado, let's get right into it. These movies sucked. These are the 20 worst movies of 2022. Starting us off at the bottom at number 20, I have The Gray Man, the Russo brothers' latest attempt to branch outside of the MCU and failing miserably. At 19, I have The Invitation. At 18, I have the most disappointing movie of the year, Don't Worry, Darling. At 17 is Mr. Harrigan's Phone, not the only Stephen King adaptation you'll be seeing on this list. At 16, I have Beast. At 15 is a movie that a lot of people seem to really enjoy, but I hated every minute of, and that was Fall. At 14, I have Uncharted, yet another complete failure of a video game adaptation. At 13, I have Hocus Pocus 2. Hot take for you, the first Hocus Pocus wasn't even that good, so what the hell did they make a sequel for? At number 12, I have The Bubble, easily Judd Apatow's worst movie to date. This movie feels like it was years too late. It takes place at the beginning of the pandemic, and let's be honest, is that a time that any of us really want to relive? And also, like most Judd Apatow movies, it's too fucking long. This movie is nearly 2.5 hours. It had no right being that long. And just barely missing my top 10 worst of the year, I have Morbius. I know this movie is just a huge meme at this point, but I'm sorry, that doesn't make it a good movie. I know I'll probably get a ton of comments that say, oh, Morbius is the movie of the year. Bro, Morbius was awesome. It wasn't. It was the furthest thing from it. Alright, that was 20 through 11. Now let's get into the top 10. At number 10, I have the self-proclaimed erotic thriller Deep Water. Yes, this movie was marketed as an erotic thriller, and I made the joke that a much more accurate tagline would be Flaccid Snooze Fest. Because this movie is not erotic, nor is it thrilling. Ana de Armas, the love of my life, is in yet another horrible movie. She was in this, The Gray Man, and also Blonde, which wasn't good either, but it wasn't bad enough to make my worst of the year list. And she's a great actress, and her and Ben Affleck are fine in this movie, but the problem is that they have absolutely no chemistry with one another. And on top of that, both of their characters are two of the worst people ever, and neither of them have any redeeming qualities. I found it difficult to root for either of them, and that's a problem because I feel I should be rooting for at least one of them. But yeah, this movie's not erotic, it's not thrilling, it's just one of the most boring movies of the year, and that's how you know you have a problem. At number 9, I have the other failed Stephen King adaptation on this list, Firestarter. Now, I am not familiar with the Firestarter book or the original movie from the 80s, but what I do know is that this Firestarter movie is a total incoherent mess. God's honest truth, I barely knew what was happening. The plot lines are so poorly explained, I kind of found it difficult to follow what was going on. The acting from everybody is so incredibly mediocre, and I really feel bad because Zac Efron is one of the stars, and you could tell that he's doing his absolute best to make this work, but he was so miscast in this role. But the worst thing a movie can be is forgettable, and that's exactly what Firestarter is. It's completely forgettable, because I forgot that it even came out this year. At number 8, I have a movie that I feel flew under a lot of people's radar, and that was Dashcam. This is without question the most annoying and obnoxious movie of the year. And most of that is due to the main character. I think her name is Annie, if I'm remembering correctly. And if you're not familiar with Dashcam, what this movie is a found footage film that takes place at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, but the movie completely forgets what time period that it took place in because there are a multitude of plot holes, such as the main character getting on a plane without a mask, also her being sick of the COVID restrictions in Los Angeles, so she goes to London of all places, a place that was 10 times more strict than Los Angeles. But on top of the plot holes, the dialogue is some of the worst I've heard all year. This movie isn't scary at all for a found footage horror film. And by the end of it, absolutely none of the events we just watched are explained. So I felt no closure once it came to its conclusion. If you never heard of this movie or watched it, then I envy you. But I just saved you some time. At number 7, I have Robert Zemeckis' Pinocchio. Disney, you've done it once again with your atrocious live-action remakes. First The Lion King, then Mulan, now this. Who is asking for these movies? Because they've all been terrible. The CGI in Pinocchio is so unbelievably horrible, except for a few characters where it looks very nice. So the CGI itself is a little bit inconsistent. And there's also a weird abundance of modern pop culture references. And the acting from just about everybody is mediocre, especially Tom Hanks. He was terrible in this. And this was the second movie that Tom Hanks was in this year where he gives an awful performance as a European with a bad accent. There was a much, much better Pinocchio movie that came out this year. And I'll let you know right now, you'll see that on another list. At number 6, I have Disenchanted, yet another sequel that absolutely nobody asked for. I loved the first movie, Enchanted, but let's be honest, was anyone really yearning for a sequel? I thought the story in Enchanted concluded perfectly, but Disney, being Disney, needs to milk all of the money they can out of these properties because they know that suckers like me are gonna eat it up. But the biggest problem with Disenchanted is that it completely forgets everything that made Enchanted great. Enchanted was great because it was a parody of a fairy tale. The idea of fairy tale characters clashing with people in reality and having different ideologies and worldviews is a genius idea. But Disenchanted just completely gets rid of all of that. There's absolutely nothing that makes this movie stand out in the crowd. It just becomes your average run-of-the-mill fairy tale, and as a result, it becomes very stale and forgettable. We're getting to the top 5 now. At number 5, I have Jurassic World Dominion. Without question, the worst Jurassic Park movie ever made. Now, I hated Fallen Kingdom. I thought that movie was terrible. But I did not expect Dominion to be 100 times worse. I actually went into Dominion with some very mild expectations because I liked the setup at the end of Fallen Kingdom. And what Fallen Kingdom set up was a story where humans and dinosaurs must coexist in the world. And I really love that idea because that is a place that the Jurassic Park movies have never gone before. But instead, what we got was a preachy environmental story about giant bugs. But Dominion definitely thought that it could get a pass by including the original cast of Sam Neill, Laura Dern, and Jeff Goldblum. But it completely wastes them. It had absolutely no idea what to do with them. Hell, it didn't even know what to do with the new characters. And on top of that, all of the performances, literally from everybody, were completely phoned in. Everybody was there for a paycheck. They did not want to be there, and I wouldn't either. At number 4, I have another movie that came out at the very beginning of the year, and that was Moonfall. This is probably the most boring disaster movie that I have ever seen. And calling this movie a disaster would be a complete understatement. Yet another movie on this list where the acting is terrible and the CGI is just as bad, which is a problem for a movie that is like 95% CGI. And by the end of it, this movie tries to be a lot deeper than it actually is by making you ponder existential questions. And by its conclusion, Moonfall goes totally off the rails and becomes so freaking absurd. If this movie didn't try way too hard to be campy and instead chose to be just a normal disaster movie, then I feel it would have been a lot better. At number 3, I have Choose or Die, not the only Netflix horror movie that you'll be seeing. This is yet another completely forgettable movie, because aside from myself, I don't know anyone else who watched Choose or Die, and I envy them. Choose or Die is so boring, nonsensical, and again, not scary. But Choose or Die actually has a very good idea. A video game where you need to complete a near impossible task or lose your life. That's a pretty awesome idea if you ask me. But they completely destroyed any sort of chance this movie had to be good. I really don't know why Netflix publicly said that they chose to defund big budget ambitious movies like The Irishman and instead choose to fund garbage like this. At number 2 is the other Netflix horror movie, and that was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm noticing a theme here. This list contains a lot of completely unnecessary sequels that absolutely nobody asked for. Because this Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a direct sequel to the original from 1978, except this one is worse in every single way. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a classic. I love that movie. And for lack of a better term, this Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie tries to be as woke as possible by tackling real-world issues like gentrification, racism, and even school shootings. But the problem is that this is not the type of movie to tackle subjects like that, and it completely falls flat on all of them anyway. The only saving grace of this movie is that it is very bloody and gory, but the problem is that the movie feels like it really has nothing else to offer, so it relies way too heavily on the violence. You really can't make your movie as violent as possible and expect everything to be okay. You need to make it interesting too, and this Texas Chainsaw Massacre is most certainly not that. And here we are at number 1, and if you subscribe to me on YouTube, you follow me on TikTok, then my worst movie of the year will be absolutely no surprise to you. And that was Halloween Ends. No movie pissed me off this year more than this one. Now, full disclaimer, I've mentioned this, but I am not really a fan of the other 2 Halloween movies in this trilogy. Halloween 2018 was very mediocre, and Halloween Kills was bad, but Halloween Ends makes those movies look like masterpieces. And I know what you're thinking, oh, Brandon, if you didn't like the first 2 movies, then why did you go see the third one? Because then how would I have content? And I've already invested my time into 2 other movies, so why would I stop at the end of the trilogy? But what makes Halloween Ends so bad is that it completely throws away all of the setups and character arcs from the first 2 movies, and instead chooses to focus on this sappy love story of 2 characters that you don't give a fuck about, and it feels like an episode of Euphoria more than anything. The disrespect to the characters of Michael Myers and Laurie Strode in this movie is absolutely staggering. This was teased to be the be-all, end-all of the Halloween franchise. This was their big showdown to end it all. And both of them are even on the poster, but that is a fucking lie because both of them are minor characters in this movie. It was a complete disrespect to the franchise, the characters, and especially the fans. If anything, this movie just completely spit in the face of all of the fans of the Halloween franchise because it does not respect them whatsoever. And in 2023, David Gordon Green is coming out with his own version of The Exorcist, so I can't wait to see how he ruins that classic movie. Well, that's it, everybody. Those were my top 20 worst movies of 2022. If you guys agree with my list, if you disagree with my list, let me know. I would love to know. I love hearing differing opinions. If you guys like this video, be sure to hit that thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe. If you want to see my best and worst list of 2021, I will link those right over here. Other than that, I hope you all have a tremendous rest of your day. And I will see you all next time when we go over the best movies of 2022.